How cool is that? A do-it-yourself boat shelter.
Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to Motor City Boat Werks. Let's get to work. Welcome back to the show. Man, it's already November and the weather is starting to get a lot colder. I just don't know where all the time has gone. Right now, we're kind of stuck with a little bit of a backlog trying to get the shower covering and the headliner material installed in the boat so we can finish up phase 1 and move on to phase 2. Everything takes a little bit of time, so have patience. As we approach the winter months here in Michigan, one of the projects has risen to the top of the list. I think it's a project that everyone can relate to, and you've probably asked yourself, I wonder if that's even possible. This episode is about building a do-it-yourself shelter out of shrink wrap material. If you're new to the channel, in addition to the pocket trawler that I have inside the Boat Werks, I have another boat that I'm working on. It's a 20-foot trailerable sailboat that I have parked outside the Boat Werks. There's just not enough room to fit everything inside. And I've been working to come up with a mock-up for a pilot house on this sailboat, and as the leaves fall, they have just been making a mess all over the boat. It's caused me to realize that I really need to get this thing covered up. And I've been thinking, how can I come up with some sort of inexpensive, do-it-yourself sailboat shelter that will last a couple seasons, maybe a year or two, while I get this boat project done. And I remembered that back in 2018, when I was still working, I had an amazing job offer that was going to take me overseas, and I needed a way to cover up the Albin 27 and store it somewhere while I was gone, living in a foreign country. So I ended up having it professionally shrink wrapped for a very reasonable price, and I stored it in an RV parking lot for $40 a month. It worked great for the years that I was overseas. I was so impressed with this plastic shrink wrap material that I have been thinking for a while about what if you made a boat shelter using this stuff. And I came up with the idea of using an old party tent. People use them for weddings, anniversaries, graduations. They buy them for one-time use and then they end up getting rid of them. They sell them on Craigslist or on Facebook Marketplace. These tents will use a metal pole frame system and they're usually 10 by 20 feet long. They sell for as little as $50 to $75 a piece. Now, these are not the cheap tent systems that you'll find at a big box store. They tend to be a little bit better quality. They usually have about 2-inch diameter poles that go together with either a locking mechanism or some type of a spring catch. The feet can be bolted to a mounting surface and they're designed to stay up for a period of time. A 10 by 20 party tent might work if you're doing a smaller boat, but for any type of a sailboat, you're going to need something that's a little bit taller. This is what led me to buy 2 used party tents, 10 by 20, and I decided that I would kind of cannibalize them in order to make a new shelter frame that would be 10 feet wide by 30 feet long by 14 feet tall. Come on, the bigger the better, right?
By using the metal poles as the frame, I would then go ahead and have the entire structure shrink wrap, just like you would a giant boat. Now I'll make my notes from my Da Vinci notebook and detailed parts list available to the workers if you're interested in doing this type of project. The first step was coming up with a design and kind of measuring everything out to make sure that it covered the sailboat on the trailer. The next step is to pre-assemble the frame by through-bolting all the legs and trusses together so things can be put together kind of in increments. Make sure your bolts and bolt heads are facing the right way so that they don't chafe against the plastic once it's wrapped around the structure. I used 1/4 inch bolts. Be sure to use a lot of extra washers. I built a wooden jig to hold the poles steady while I drilled them using a drill press. To make the legs extra long, I used PVC or electrical conduit to act as a sleeve to reinforce the tubing. It's important at this stage that everything is aligned properly and all the surfaces are smooth.
If you're enjoying this episode, would you do me a favor? Hit the like button and maybe leave a comment below. I invite you to subscribe. And if you really want to help out the channel, well, please consider leaving a donation on Patreon. This channel would not be possible without your support.
Today we're doing a little bit of construction. I'm going to begin erecting the temporary shelter, the do-it-yourself boat shed for the Skipper 20 sailboat. It's going to be a multi-step process. I've assembled most of the tube frame, and now I'm going to be kind of putting it in place and beginning to see whether or not this thing's going to kind of hold itself together. Will it be able to take the plastic covering? These black things here are 4x4 by 24-inch metal ground spikes. They're fence post anchors. That's what the base of the legs will be screwed into. I learned an important lesson. Make sure you align all of your ground spikes so everything looks square and looks good.
Now, I want to be honest with you. For this project, I had every intention of doing the shrink wrap myself. It's a skill that I've wanted to pick up for a while, but the weather is just not cooperating. And with the holidays and family obligations pulling me away from the boat works, I decided that I needed to hire somebody to get this job done. That being said, I think anyone can shrink wrap a temporary shelter. The material cost is pretty much fixed. It's really about the labor. The shrink wrap for your temporary structure is going to run you $400 in materials. And then for the do-it-yourselfer, it may run you another $500 or $600 in equipment. So you really have to ask yourself, is it worth paying someone to do this unless you have a lot of shrink wrapping? Or perhaps you want to develop a side hustle. It may be worthwhile to just pay somebody to do the shrink wrap job for you. I hired a local company and they did a great job. It took about 2 hours for them to shrink wrap the entire frame. Now, I had already added some furring strips between the legs of the frame to make it a little more rigid. They added 2x4s to the base of the frame so that the shrink wrap would have something to anchor to. The order of work went something like this. First, they pulled the shrink wrap over the top of the frame and got it into place. The biggest thing that intimidated me was how would someone get the shrink wrap over the top of such a tall structure? And this is where I learned some tricks from the guys I hired. They use this tool. They call it the big stick. No! Ow! The big stick has a lot of uses. It's used to unroll the shrink wrap, and it's also used to pull the shrink wrap over the top of the structure rather than climbing up on a ladder. They anchored the bottom of the shrink wrap by wrapping it around the 2x4s at the base of the frame. They then folded the corners at the back of the frame, almost like you're wrapping a package. At this point, the shrink wrap was beginning to take shape. They began to heat up the sides, and they cut an opening in the doorway. Once the four corners and the bottom are in place, it's time to start shrinking. Even with the professional guns, sometimes the shrink wrap would get a hole in it. You just fix that later on using some shrink wrap tape. This particular structure is about 7 mil thick. I would recommend that you get the thickest shrink wrap available, something around 10 millimeter. If you have guide wires, be sure to shrink wrap the structure first and then cut a hole, bring the guide wires through. Wait, I'm not done yet. I gotta say, this one far exceeded my expectations. The structure is waterproof. It's now completely dry inside. The structure is anchored to the ground through a combination of ground spikes and guide wires. I can maneuver all around the sailboat. I'll be able to work on it, no problem. I may add a couple of barn doors or a tarp to the front if I'm going to be working inside.
You know it's time to tally the butcher's bill.
The 2 used tents cost $150 off of Craigslist. I bought about $30 worth of miscellaneous nuts and bolts and another $20 worth of lumber. The ground spikes, well, they cost $120 by themselves. And to hire a company that shrink wrapped the frame, well, that cost $850. All total, my do-it-yourself shrink wrap sailboat shed cost $1,150. For around $1,000, I think my do-it-yourself sailboat shed was a success.
Not bad, pretty good job.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Stay motivated.
If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. These videos would not be possible without your support.